So this week's Torah portion, Parashat Vayishlach. Vayishlach means, and he sent. And it tells of the story of how Yaakov sent messengers to his brother Esav, telling him that Yaakov, is on his way home. His reconciliation with Esav, or was it a reconciliation? Traditions differ, we're not sure. The rape of Yaakov's daughter Dinah, and Yaakov eventually settling near Beit El. When we read the Bible, we are very aware of the fact that it's broken up into chapters and verses. These chapters and verses are not Jewish. They actually were, the Bible was divided up by the Christian church into chapters and verses. If you read the Torah, and you open up a Torah scroll, you see that there's no vocalization, there are no vowels, and there's no punctuation either. So it's one long book. So it's sort of 5 books. We know that the Torah is made up of 5 books, and there are double spaces between each book, so you know when a book ends and the next one begins, but really it's read as one document. So it's not really surprising that if you look at this week's Torah portion, it begins in verse 4 of chapter 32, not verse 1, verse 4. And why does the rabbis break up the parasha that way? If you remember last week's Torah portion, we read about how Yaakov had to leave the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, for 2 reasons. He left fleeing his brother's wrath. Esau was angry because Yaakov had stolen his birthright. But also, his parents, Yitzchak and Rivka, had sent Yaakov to Mesopotamia, to Iraq, to find a wife, because they didn't want him marrying a local Canaanite woman, heaven forfend, because they might influence him to be disloyal to God. So he leaves home. So we begin the first word of last week's parasha, Vayetze, and he left, he exited, he went. And he, of course, comes to this place and he decides to spend the night in this place. He hasn't left the land of Canaan yet. He's about to, but he spends the night there, and he has this dream of a ladder connecting earth to heaven and angels, malachim, going up and down. And God stands above Yaakov and promises to look after Yaakov while Yaakov journeys to Mesopotamia, and promises to bring him back to the land of Canaan. And it's the first time that we understand this concept of God as being the God of the world. Because up until then, people believed, and Abraham certainly and Yitzchak believed, that the gods or God only had jurisdiction over a certain part of the world. But here God says to Yaakov, I'm going to look after you while you journey, and I'm going to bring you back in safety and bless you by giving you and your descendants this land. So he meets the angels of God, Malachei Elohim, in that dream, just before he's going to leave the land of Canaan. And it ends, last week's parasha ends with Yaakov about to enter the land of Canaan again, and once again he's met with angels of God, Malachei Elohim. The first time when he meets the angels, he wakes up from the dream and he calls the place Beit El, which literally means the house of God. And at the end of last week's parasha, when he meets the angels again on his way into the land, back into the land of Canaan, he calls the place Machanaim, which means camps, the camps of God. So it's very, from a literary point of view, very neat, last week's parasha, because you have Yaakov meeting angels at the beginning and Yaakov meeting angels at the end, and the narrative is sandwiched in between those 2 meetings. And this week, it begins, Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav. Jacob sends malachim before him. So malach is a messenger, and could be a divine messenger, messenger from the divine, hence an angel, from the Greek word angel, which means messenger. Or a messenger can simply mean human beings that are sent with a message. So when we read that Yaakov sent messengers before him to Esav, his brother, to say, I'm here, and he wants to test out Esav to see whether Esav is angry with him still or not. He learns that Esav is coming to meet him with 400 armed warriors, and so he's worried, quite rightly. So he sends messengers to suss out the situation. And these could be, and we read it literally as human beings are going to see what's up with Esau. But the rabbis point out that the Hebrew says, Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav, that Jacob sent messengers before him. And they say, what's this lefanav? That really don't need that word, that preposition, because obviously he sent messengers to go ahead of him. So why is it put there? And the rabbis believe that every single word in the Torah has a meaning. There's no superfluous words in the Torah, no unnecessary words in Torah. So look at this word lefanav, and they look at other instances of this word appearing. And this word usually appears when the divine has something to do with it, and God has something to do with it. So many commentators, including Rashi, comment and say that these messengers that Yaakov sent were angels, were divine messengers. And he says it's continuing with this theme. Yaakov meets messengers just before he leaves the land of Israel. He meets messengers of God just before he re-enters the land of Israel. Now sending these messengers on to Esau. So they're divine messengers. And so Or HaChaim asks the question, why does Yaakov send angels to his brother Esau and not just human beings? And he says, well, first of all, maybe it's to put literally the fear of God into Esau, so Esau doesn't attack him, because he's worried Esau might still attack him. But another reason he gives is perhaps the angels are only people, the only beings capable of diplomacy, of not making a faux pas and ruining this union between Yaakov and Esau. And so he relies on them rather than human beings who might make a mistake and anger Esau more. And Rabbeinu Bachya reminds us that God sent, when Abraham asks his servant, who's not named in the Torah, the rabbis call him Eliezer, to find a wife for his son Yitzchak. The Torah says that God sent messengers or angels, malachim, with this servant so that he'd find the right woman to marry Yitzchak. So there's a constant theme there. Yaakov calls a place where he meets God's messengers for the first time, Beit El, the house of God. And the place, he says that he comes to the place, Makom. Makom is also another name for God. God is the place. God is omnipresent. The world is in God. And when he arrives, before entering the land of Israel, he comes to a place where once more angels of God meet with him. And so he calls that place Machanaim, the camps of God. And so when you're going to a place, when you're going before God, you need messengers to intercede with you, to help you, to guide you when you stand before the divine presence. So we read that once the messengers come back to Yaakov and they say that Esau has got these armed men, Yaakov is quite worried, so he divides his camp into two, sends the first half over the river Jordan, waits a bit, and then sends the second half. The second half of his camp contain his wives and his concubines and all his children. And he's still thinking is that if Esau is angry and might attack the first camp, hopefully his anger will be sated by the time the second camp arrives, so he'll leave his wives and children alone. And then he elects to go back to the east side of the Jordan as a tributary of the Yabok to spend the night, to contemplate the future, because he's about to reunite with his brother. And then he meets a man, and he wrestles with that man. And at the break of dawn, Yaakov has him in a stranglehold, probably a Nelson's lock, whatever they call it. And the man says, "Let me go," because dawn's approaching. Which is a bit of a clue that this can't be an ordinary man, because why is he afraid of the dawn rising before he's let free? And Yaakov says, "I'll only let you go if you give me a blessing." And this man says, "Your blessing will be that you'll no longer be Yaakov, the one who tries to usurp others." So remember, Yaakov's name comes from the Hebrew word akev, meaning a heel. Yaakov is born holding onto the heel of Esau, trying to put him back so that Yaakov, can be the firstborn. And the rest of his life he spent, or childhood at least, spent trying to usurp his brother, cheats him out of the birthright, gets the blessing of the firstborn. You'll no longer be Yaakov, but you'll be Yisrael. Yisrael, the Torah tells us, means one who strives with the divine, with God. But another understanding of Yisrael, Yisrael, means one who walks upright or straight with God. And that's when Yaakov lets him go. But in this fight, Yaakov gets wounded in the hip, so he has a limp. When he crosses the Jordan and he goes to meet his brother Esav, he's no longer swaggering and proud of himself. He's limping towards his brother. The Torah says he bows down 7 times as he approaches his brother. And he calls his brother my Lord as a courtesy to show his humility. And that's where Esav embraces and kisses him. The Haftarah for this Shabbat is from Hosea. And Hosea refers to this incident of this wrestling match. But he doesn't say a man wrestled with Yaakov. He says a malach, an angel, a messenger from God wrestles with Yaakov. There are many commentaries on what this wrestling match was all about. Who was this mysterious man or angel? Some say it was Esav's guardian angels. Some say it was Yaakov's guardian angel. Some say it was Yaakov's conscience. He's wrestling with his conscience. But here's another instance of Yaakov not only meeting with, but wrestling with a malach, an angel. And he becomes humble. He takes on the pseudonym of Yisrael. And that's how he meets his brother Esav. So what do we learn from all this? Perhaps we learn that in life, we have to always be conscious of a superior power that's over us, a superior being. Whether it's the source of creation, whether it's an energy, whether it's something more, is entirely up to your personal belief. But if you're conscious of that superior power, then you become humble. And then you will stand in the place, will stand in the divine presence in everything you do. You will act accordingly. And if everybody does that, how much better will the world be? So let us always, when we come in, meet angels. When you go out, meet angels. And be aware of the divine presence always. Can you hear us, son? Amen.